Happy holidays, everyone. I hope you and your families are all well right now during this crazy time that we're living in. I wanted to try something a little bit different for this video. I haven't done this in a while, but I really wanted to try making a video without a script. If you've watched a few of my videos, then chances are you've watched a video where I scripted my voiceover before recording it. This one just kind of feels like it needs to be a little bit different because the story I'm going to tell here doesn't really lend itself that well to a script. I know because I once made a video about this exact same story about 5 years ago, and let's just say it had mixed results. For whatever reason, I decided to turn on a face cam, and you could just tell by watching my eyes go back and forth across the screen that I was reading a script. That's actually one of the main reasons I want to remake this video. That video itself was fine for what it was at the time. I had just started on YouTube that year, and I was still figuring out video editing. I was still just figuring out how to make a good YouTube video. So that video, I'm okay with what it was, but it just... I just feel like this story deserves more than what that video could do. Also, it's kind of my favorite story or my favorite time from Christmas, and I'll be honest, I'm not feeling the best this year because this is the first year that I will not be spending Christmas with my family. I am 29 years old, and the past 28 years of my life, I have spent every Christmas with my family. Due to COVID, I won't be able to see them this year, so remaking this video just seems kind of right for this year. So without further ado, a Gamer Christmas Story version 2. The year was 2001. It was September, and the September 11th attacks had just happened, and being a kid who was growing up in a town about a half hour to an hour away from New York City, it was kind of always there. We all did our best to get back to our normal lives, so I'd say about maybe a week or so later, I came home from school one day and I saw this issue of Electronic Gaming Monthly sitting on my bed. This particular issue was the August issue, and it featured a giant preview of all of the games that were coming out for the GameCube, the PlayStation 2, and the Xbox for the rest of the year, and also some stuff that was coming out the year after. Despite losing track of this magazine years ago, I still remember the cover of it very vividly. It had a indigo Nintendo GameCube on it with a couple of the Super Smash Bros. Characters on top of it. I'm not even really that big of a Super Smash Bros. Fan, but for whatever reason, this cover just sticks with me. I don't think I'll ever forget it. Also, thanks to a very, very kind person on Reddit who was willing to set aside the time to actually scan every single page of this issue that they still had and send it to me, I now have the scans from this issue. Assuming I've remembered to do this, and I hope I remember to do this, I'll have this uploaded to RetroMags, so if anybody wants to see these scans, they can download them. But for now, we're just going to talk about the magazine itself. The fall preview coverage that I was talking about is essentially just the stuff that they had learned while they were at E3. There's sections for the Xbox, the GameCube, the PS2, and this kind of depressing section for the Dreamcast, where they show this photo and it's just like, there's a couple of things, a couple of games set up, and there's just like maybe a handful of people walking around, and it's just sad. Especially when you compare it to the other booths that they show from the other consoles. I don't really remember paying that much attention to the PlayStation 2 section, really, but I do remember actually taking the time to read through all of the Xbox stuff, for whatever reason. I didn't own an Xbox, obviously it wasn't out yet, and I didn't really have much of an attachment to Microsoft, so I don't really know what was catching my attention about this, but I do remember like actually sitting and reading through a lot of these previews. First and very much foremost was the game that my dumb 10-year-old brain thought was pronounced Hollow. There's only like 4 screenshots here, but I still remember being pretty interested in wanting to know more about it, although I wouldn't actually get Halo for like another 2 years after this, so it would be a while. Then of course there was, well, what was called at the time Jet Grind Radio Future, which would later be called Jet Set Radio Future to keep it in line with both Europe and Japan. I haven't done a video on Jet Set Radio Future yet, but Jet Grind Radio was one of my favorite games on the Dreamcast, so you can bet this caught my eye and I was very much interested in getting it. I remember looking at some other stuff like that terrible looking Shrek game, Star Wars Obi-Wan, which looked pretty cool to me, but I later found out wasn't a great game, but I probably would have gone through it anyway because I actually put some decent hours into the Star Wars Episode 1 game on PS1, so I'll let that speak for itself. Then, of course, you get to the end and it's Air Force Delta Storm, and I've done a video on that one as well, so of course you guys know that I really enjoyed that game, so of course I was very excited for this game too. Then we get to the Nintendo GameCube section. The page that really stuck out to me that I remember very vividly looking through as a kid was this page where they're showing the hardware. They're showing the final controller there, and then the prototype controller right beneath it, where you can see that the original design had those jelly bean buttons going all around the A button, and they switched it to having two circle buttons, the A button and the B button, for the final design. And then there's also that that Panasonic GameCube, the one that had the DVD drive in it. I don't ever remember seeing that in the US. I'm pretty sure there was a US release, but it was very limited, because I've seen them around, but they're not particularly easy to find. And I don't think I ever saw one growing up. Like I said, I never ever saw a box for one. Although I wanted one, because that was like the one thing that really differentiated it from the Xbox and the PS2 was the DVD player. But it was still an emerging media at the time, so we didn't even really have that many DVDs anyway, so oh well. The game section starts with a bunch of the Nintendo exclusives that were coming out around the holidays, like your Pikmins, your Luigi's Mansion, your Super Smash Bros. Melee, and a couple other games that were coming out in the launch window as well. But it was this little piece that caught my eye in the third-party section that really got me excited for the GameCube. Star Wars Rogue Leader Rogue Squadron 2. There's only 4 pictures here. 3 of them are from the same level, and one of them's from a level I don't even really like in hindsight. But I remember reading this and reading the line, "Put simply, this game is the movie." And I was pretty much sold. I loved the original Rogue Squadron on N64, and the idea that they were going to make another one and that this game was going to stick more to the movies just sounded great. So I was friends with a lot of the kids on my block growing up, and I can say pretty confidently that the majority of them were Nintendo fans. I do remember specifically that one of my friends got Nintendo Power every month. Right around the time that I had gotten this EGM issue, he had also gotten an issue of Nintendo Power that went through all the stuff for the GameCube as well. This led to all of us gathering on, whatever day it was, whether it was a Friday night, a Saturday, or Sunday, or whatever, and we'd just kind of talk about how awesome the GameCube sounded. And, me particularly, I'd just talk on and on and on about Rogue Squadron 2, and I'd occasionally slip in things about the Xbox, because, I thought the Xbox was cool too, but Rogue Squadron 2 was the game that pushed me over into Team GameCube. So some time passed and it came time to give our Christmas list off to mom and dad. Now, a quick aside about my mom and dad. When it came to buying stuff for either myself or my sister, my mom and dad would be very frugal throughout most of the year. If there was something that we wanted, we had to save up our money and buy it ourselves. Except if it was our birthday or Christmas. Particularly for Christmas, my mom and dad were very, very generous. With that being said, I didn't really have much of a problem putting down on that Christmas list that I wanted a Nintendo GameCube, Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2, and Tony Hawk 3. And that was it. Another side about my dad. While my dad is a very generous person around Christmas, like I said, he is also a man of routine. Every day for 20 years of my life until he retired, this was my father's schedule. He would get up, plug the coffee in, go back to sleep for 10 minutes, get up again, get his coffee, go to work, come home, take a nap for 2 hours, eat dinner, read, or watch TV, and go to bed. He wasn't super strict. He didn't mind little disruptions to that routine, obviously. But what was coming definitely threw a bit of a wrench into his normal everyday life. I see a lot of you on social media talking about how the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series consoles are hard to find right now, but they weren't the first ones to have this problem. Back in November 2001, the Nintendo GameCube launched and promptly disappeared from every store shelf around us. My father's job had him driving all over the county that we lived in, and he was checking every game store he could think of, and he could not find a GameCube anywhere. Granted, I was none the wiser about this. I didn't even know when the GameCube technically launched. I wasn't really that well versed in any of that stuff back at the age of 10. It actually caught me by surprise one day. A friend of mine and I were walking to another one of my friend's houses, and he had said that he had gotten the Nintendo GameCube, and we were saying we didn't believe him because we didn't even know that the GameCube had launched at that point. So needless to say, we were a little bit shocked when he came running up to his window with a copy of Luigi's Mansion and Rogue Squadron 2 in his hands. That wasn't my first time seeing the GameCube. I had seen it on display at like a Toys R Us or something before then, but that was my first time seeing it hooked up to a TV on like a big TV and being able to like look at it and see longer play sessions, not just demos. He put on Rogue Squadron 2 and I was just completely blown away by it. The game was a huge step up graphically from Rogue Squadron 1, and it just looks smoother to me, which I would later find out is because it was 60 frames per second as opposed to 30 frames per second on the Nintendo 64 with Rogue Squadron 1. I don't remember spending too much time with it that day, but I do remember it really ratcheting up my excitement for the console, which made something that happened soon after a little bit disappointing. So one thing that I think is relatively universal across most kids being raised Christian or Catholic is that they really don't like getting up for church. And I was no exception. Still, my mom would usually entice us by saying that we could go get brunch after church at this diner by the church in our town, which was a really good diner. So that usually got us out the door. So we got through church and we're sitting at the diner and we're looking to order our food, and my mom just sort of looks up at me and I just see this look on her face. It looks kind of, I guess the word I would want to use is defeated. She looks at me and says, "David, was there anything else you really wanted for Christmas besides that GameCube?" Right then, I knew instantly what was going on. The GameCube was probably sold out and they were having a really hard time finding it. Well, I'll definitely fess up and say that I was really disappointed to hear this. I also wanted to be on record that I was no Dudley Dursley when it came to gifts. I never was the type to erupt into a tantrum just because I wasn't getting the thing that I wanted. That being said, I was pretty quick to offer a second option and said, "Well, can I have the Xbox instead?" And she said, "Yeah." The only catch was that I couldn't have Halo. I was still 10 years old at that time, so that wasn't really going to be happening. And for those of you that kind of remember the original Xbox's launch lineup, Halo was kind of the centerpiece there. But there was some other pretty cool games there too. So I looked through the games again and made up a new list, and I honestly can't remember the exact games that I asked for, but I do remember one because it's such a weird pick. It was NASCAR Heat 2002. Why did I pick this game? I don't remember why I picked it, but I remember picking it. Why did I pick a NASCAR game? I don't even like NASCAR. Man, the weird stuff that my 10-year-old brain would do sometimes. But anyway, I know that I would have put Air Force Delta Storm on there too. I don't exactly remember doing it, but I loved the first game, so I would have put that game on there too. So I gave my mom the new list, and while I was just a little bit disappointed about the GameCube, I still was pretty excited for the Xbox. Man, NASCAR Heat, what was I thinking? So some more time passed, and as the shopping season began to ramp up a little bit, I found myself in the very familiar situation of going to Sears with my mom. For those of you that didn't see my Jet Set Radio video, the basic gist of this is that my mom would sometimes take me to Sears with her when she would go shopping, and she would leave me in the electronics section while she went to go shop in the rest of the store. During this particular time, she would come back from shopping and see me in front of the GameCube playing Rogue Squadron 2, and she definitely took note of that. So time continued to pass, and before I knew it, it was December. While the most memorable thing for most people in December is Christmas itself, there was one thing about that particular December that really stuck with me. Towards the beginning of the month, my mom took my sister and I into the city to go see A Christmas Carol with Tim Curry. It was kind of left open what we were going to be doing after that, but the main event was Christmas Carol. I actually got this little teddy bear while I was there, and it said like A Christmas Carol on it, and it was dressed like Scrooge. I still have that bear, but I think it's at my parents' place still, and I would not ask my mother to go diving through my old room looking for something like that, because that would take a very long time to find. What she did find for me, though, was this old picture that she took of my sister and I by the tree in Rockefeller Center. That December must have been pretty warm, because as you can see, I'm wearing basically just a t-shirt. It's my Survivor Outback shirt. Just the premium fashion statement right there, let me tell you. Also, apparently I was in that period of my life where smiling was for losers. My sister and I actually took that picture again just a few years ago when we went into the city, so at least I managed to smile for that one. Sort of. I remember a lot about that trip. I remember going to dinner at this place called Hamburger Harry's, which I don't think is there anymore, but I remember the food was really good. And then going into Times Square to the new, what was at that time, the new Toys R Us. This place was so new at the time that you had to stand in line for like, it had to have been like a half hour to an hour just to get into the store. And I remember being online and looking up and seeing a billboard with that giant Xbox logo on it, the black background with the green X on there. I remember getting into the store and going downstairs into their video game section and seeing just lines of people buying Xboxes and PS2s, but the GameCube was also sold out there too, so it was just Xboxes and PS2s. While I don't think there was a demo set up there, I still found myself over at the GameCube section looking at all the games, which, again, my mother took notice of. So a few more weeks went by and it was Christmas Eve. One tradition that my family kept for the most part every year was that every Christmas Eve we would go over to my grandmother's house for dinner. Of course, before that we had to go to church, and man, oh man, did I not like going to that service in particular. I noticed when I was a kid that time seemed to go a little bit slower than it does now that I'm an adult. I think that's kind of the general thing for most people, but the Christmas Eve service at my church was so slow it bordered on purgatory. Granted, I'd say that was half because I didn't really like going to church in the first place, but also half because Christmas Eve at my grandmother's house was a lot of fun too. The food was different pretty much every year if I remember correctly, but what I could always count on, being the soda addict that I was that I would kind of drink every Coke in the fridge, much to my mom's irritation. My aunt would always set aside a period of time to watch It's a Wonderful Life on the main TV, so if you didn't want to watch It's a Wonderful Life, you kind of had to find a way to entertain yourself. This particular year, my sister was really into The Sims. And as it just so happened, my cousin had The Sims installed on my grandmother's computer. So we trooped upstairs and started playing The Sims for the rest of the night. And by we played it, I mean my sister and my cousins played it while I sat on the bed and watched. I was cool with it though, because honestly, my cousin had just gotten this new dog and I was kind of afraid of dogs back then, which if my cousin's hearing this now, she's probably laughing, because that particular dog was the most utterly not frightening animal you could possibly think of. Though when I think back to that specific year and that specific Christmas Eve, that image of me being in that room with them while they played The Sims really sticks with me. Although now that I'm looking at it now in hindsight, having built a gaming PC, having done all this stuff, it really surprises me that a computer that they bought for like just everyday non-gaming use was able to run The Sims. I guess PC gaming back then was just a little bit different. Like, you know, basic computers could run games at their most basic settings and it just wasn't really that big of a deal. Or maybe that was just something about The Sims. I don't know. So we all went home, and before I knew it, Christmas morning had come. As per tradition with pretty much every Christmas as a kid, I woke up really, really early. I'm talking like, I think it was like 6 in the morning or something like that. The sun wasn't even up yet. I'm sure there are other people listening to this right now who know exactly what I'm talking about. You get up super early in the morning, your parents are hours away from getting up, and you have to find a way to entertain yourself until they do. Weird now that looking at it from hindsight, I think just last year I was the last one up. Anyway, I did what pretty much any kid does in that situation. I turned on the TV, I set the volume to like 1, and just watched TV until my parents woke up. My sister woke up right around the same time and did the exact same thing. One thing I remember very vividly about how my mom and dad would do Christmas was how they laid out the gifts. When you think of a scene of a living room on Christmas morning, you think of a bunch of presents all stacked beneath a tree, maybe some in the back, but most of them are underneath the tree, and that's about it. My parents did something a little bit different. They would put some of the presents underneath the tree, but then they would also do this line across the entertainment center where the TV was. So as you're sitting watching TV, you just see this line of presents right in front of the TV. The way this looked, it was almost like there was like a line of presents going around the entire side of the room, plus the stockings too. Again, let me reiterate, my parents were very generous around Christmas time. So even though I'd only asked for an Xbox and 2 games, there was definitely more for me than just an Xbox and 2 games. So after what felt like an eternity, my parents finally got up and we started opening presents. I picked a square thing that was underneath the TV first, and I opened it up only to find a Nintendo GameCube carrying case. I was really confused. My mother had insisted that my dad couldn't find a GameCube. In fact, not even realizing what was going on, my dumb 10-year-old self even turned to my mom and said, "Hey mom, I think you guys got the wrong case." It was at that exact same time that my dad came out of his room with another square package, handed it to me, and said, "Merry Christmas, Dave." Then the light bulb went off and I realized what was going on. I quickly ripped off the wrapping paper and there was a black Nintendo GameCube. I will never forget just how surprised, excited, and just generally speaking over the moon I was to be looking at that Nintendo GameCube. To me, it felt like my parents had somehow managed to make the impossible possible. As it turns out, after that whole conversation in the diner that I'd had with my mother back in November, my dad had still kept looking for a Nintendo GameCube. Granted, he was having a really hard time finding it, but about a week before Christmas, he had decided to check this one GameStop that he knew that was kind of tucked away that not a lot of people knew about. I've asked him about this both before making my first video and after making my first video, and he's told me that basically when he walked in there, that there was 5 GameCubes in this GameStop. Can you imagine that happening now? Can you imagine walking into a GameStop and seeing like 5 PS5s or 5 Xbox Series X's just there? That wouldn't happen now. And I'm still sort of in disbelief that it happened then. He also managed to get 4 games for me, which I didn't even ask for. If you remember, I only asked for Star Wars Rogue Squadron 2 and Tony Hawk 3. He also got me Super Smash Bros. Melee and Pikmin. Again, my parents, very generous around Christmas time. I don't think I left my room for like the rest of my Christmas break after that. It was just me in my room playing my new GameCube games with my sister just a few feet away on the family computer playing The Sims, which she had gotten for Christmas. I will never forget about that Christmas. I've told this story a few different times now, and honestly, I don't really get tired of telling it. It's 100% my favorite Christmas story from my childhood. And as I stare down the first Christmas that I'm going to be spending without my family, it really did me some good to remember a time when Christmas was just the most amazing thing ever. Thank you so much for listening to this little story of mine. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any Christmas stories that you want to share with me, please leave a comment. I do love reading them. Also, if you like this video, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell, you know all that stuff. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I hope you have a great holiday filled with great video games, and if you can manage it, great times with your family. But regardless, I will see you next time. Later.